We've all heard about the smart home, but what about the smart park? Arell, why don't you tell us what you guys are doing at Midwest Energy in terms of creating something that's really bigger than the community?
Smart Park stands for the Southwest Michigan Advanced Research and Technology. That's not fun to say, and so we call it Smart Park. And the Smart Park is about placemaking, purpose. I like to say a place with a purpose. And so around the same time that we as an organization decided we wanted to look at developing this land that we owned, roughly 400 acres that we were sitting on, the community was also revitalizing their place in the very small community in Southwest Michigan. And so as we were looking at grants, economic development grants, ways to attract people, and taking a look at bringing industry and workforce into the area, we started partnering with the community and created an entire scope of work that we could do in bringing people, especially since we sat right on a rail, Canadian National Rail that ran east to west throughout Michigan. And we started purposely working with economic developers to look at who would come and want to be a part of our community, develop with a purpose. Our first partner was Hydra Aluminium. That's how they pronounce it. Hydro Aluminum is what we would say. They're out of Norway. And they came and wanted to be a part of a community like that. That was their attracting prospect that their board communicated back to us. They have a philosophy that's hire to retire, and they wanted to be a part of something that was a community-driven place and met their needs. Being immediately close to utilities, electric co-op, fiber, internet, and then that rail location.
And so have they moved in yet, or is it something that's evolving?
They have a $150 million plant that they're building on 30 acres of the 400 developable acres that we have. We have, as part of that park, in cooperation with the United States Economic Development Corporation, received a grant. We are building out the road infrastructure. It's about a half-mile road that runs east to west, as well as a boulevard north to south. The boulevard will service commercial areas, feed into the more industrial long road is called in the city Follett. And that will open as its first smart park tenant, along with the cooperative that sits within the park area as well.
And that's very cool. And it only happened really because you guys were listening to the community, but you needed a place to expand yourselves, right?
Yeah, we had grown out of our current facility that we had been in since the early 1900s. And we looked around. There was a former individual who had owned this land. It was now in his trust. He had looked at it to do economic development, and the trust said to us, no, you have to buy all of the land. We are going to sell the 500 acres. As we looked at that, we said, yeah, I think we can do some of his vision with this. And he had industrial vision as well as home vision for multifamily tenant homes. I don't know that we're going to go that route. But we are certainly going to keep expanding and bringing in these commercial businesses as well as industrial businesses within the region.
And you had to work with the communities to make it happen, specifically the townships and so forth, right?
Yeah. Cassopolis, the village of Cassopolis, had around the same time done a think tank with their residents, and they called it Imagine Cass. We also partnered on that and said, okay, imagine the smart park. And we took some of that material that Imagine Cass thought about, what they would want their revitalization of their community to look like. And then we added to it and supplemented it. These villages started to say, yeah, we'd like to participate in that. We sit in the corner of two villages. Cassopolis was certainly a little more progressive in that. But the other village was just right along with us. Well, how can we partner? They created a mutual agreement in where we were going to sit within the villaging, permit within the villaging, and those two villages have been key in helping us make sure this moves forward as quickly as possible.
And that is one of the benefits that you offer, is the ability to get there and for a business, right?
Yeah, that is key. Getting all of these community partners involved and the residents, so that as there's roadblocks, there's always going to be people with concerns. What are you doing and why are you doing? How are you going to change where I'm at? Well, we're in a rural area, and really that's what the cooperative wants anyways. We want to maintain a rural area of purpose, and so it feeds well, and usually we can address all of those concerns. And the organizations that are coming to us recognize that, yep, there will be some workforce or housing opportunities, but they also want to come and be a part of it. So they've already started to say, Great. How are we going to supplement? Hydra, as an example, has gone to the community college. Has already provided some gifts to the college. They've already gone and started recruiting from the colleges and talking to them. And so the organizations that are attracted to this space are also interested in developing and growing within the community because they recognize it's a generational growth. They need a part of that themselves to maintain that legacy there.
I want to talk a little bit about this whole matching aspect of it, getting the right tenant, and that matches what you guys are. But first, it sounds like you also did some very specific marketing, knowing that you had that match, that you really focused on getting them to your park.
Yeah, we started working with several regional development organizations. One was specific to our 2 counties that we service immediately. We were throughout southwest Michigan, and then a larger regional one. And they started going out to site selectors. We developed some clear covenants of the quality of material, the manufacturing, the types of companies we'd want to look at, and then they started targeting those and bringing to us. We had an international site selector come recently, and in that discussion, they weren't really expecting to see what they discovered, because we did not just sit back and say, we want to develop this. We went out and created the marketing packages, the soil samples, all of the utility requirements that they would want, so that as they came to us, we were already a part of answering their questions. And then if they ask us a question we didn't understand, we'd immediately go out and look at those samples. We've done everything from traffic studies with Michigan Department of Transportation to a wide variety, so that we looked at a brewery. We wanted to bring some restaurants in, and there was a microbrewery that wanted to come in, and they didn't want to be on a place that was too busy. So we needed to make sure that there was a specific niche they were looking for. We do sit on a state road. One of the main roads right to the commercial section is that. And so we were able to give them that answer already. We had already developed that. We knew it. The local residents across the street are on a very nice, prestigious lake. They have a beautiful lake they've invested in, and it's generational. They've been there for many generations. They wanted to ensure that the truck traffic wasn't going to be too much. And so we were able to address many of those issues, and then bring these community partners on board, the residents, and we've started to hear ideas and thoughts, and it's made everyone more interested in how do we get involved? What do we need to do to be involved? Even in outside investors that wanted to come in and help start developing in the park.
And it sounds like some of the amenities could actually be a park. You were talking about trailhead and so forth.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things about it is the park is designed with a non-motorized trail. It's a 5-foot wide trail. And as we were looking at this, we have some land that we cannot use. They're underneath some transmission lines, and we were saying, what can we do this? One of our employees said, well, let's build a trailhead. That same employee said, and on the other side, I think we need to reroute that a little bit around our solar farm. We have a large solar farm. It's beautiful. And we can connect to the Center of Counseling on Aging across the street. They have a track. And so we started looking at and enabling our employees to say, but what are your ideas? And so even within that, now our employees are coming up with wonderful ideas that are allowing us to change and pivot. And so in that trailhead, we're going to take a look at how do we revitalize that. You're over here. First is picnic bench. We've talked about, but maybe we want a food truck row.
Yeah.
Right now, we have twice a month, we try and bring food trucks into our parking lot. How do we bring that into the park? We've talked about fun things like having ice cream bars for anyone who's in the summertime walking the park. Just things that get people on the trail. The far end of the trail will eventually, it'll lead off into what's a dark sky park, and that's a park where they don't want light pollution. Mm-hmm. So we have been very conscious about the light, and then that people someday will be walking that trail at night, getting to that dark sky park. So we don't just want it for a purpose sometimes, like what you and I were talking about earlier. We want it for purpose all the time, multi-generational, and involved in the community is from their perspective too.
Well, and this leads to something you've been talking about before we started talking on camera, but this whole idea of legacy and leaving the generation and having the new generation build on that legacy.
Yeah, one of the things is I came into the cooperative world, and coming from my former background, I started understanding that really to have a legacy, you have to have someone who wants to receive the legacy. Otherwise, it just goes by the wayside. And so many times we see some cities in our downtown areas that have maybe become less of what they were at one day. Well, we need to then teach each other how to care for that legacy. And as we create a legacy, we give it, and we teach a future generation how to accept it and keep making it their own and revitalizing. So it is not something that dies on the vine. It becomes organic forever. And the root of what is created today, someone who plants a tree today doesn't get to enjoy the leaves tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's legacy driven. And it's both creating it, giving it, and receiving it.
And then building on it, and that's fundamentally what the cooperative does, doesn't it? The Midwest Energy.
Yeah, we started, cooperative started under FDR because no one would take it was not economically feasible to take electricity out to the rural areas. Well, when FDR said the government will look at funding it, immediately the citizens in the area said, yeah, and we'll string it. And so at great risk to themselves, local residents began stringing electricity into their neighborhoods and their towns and across their fields, and that became the cooperative model, a long-term investment into an area where it just wasn't dense enough or didn't make sense. And that's also what's bled over into the conference that we're here, fiber and internet. Again, we need it. It's ubiquitous to our life, and we need people in rural areas to be connected, whether it's from economic development to utilities, water, electricity, internet. All of that is part of what all of our communities need.
And that's what you're saying, in the cooperative model, everyone gets served.
It's a part of it. We just do that. We don't get to choose, or we don't want to ever choose, you get it and you don't. No, everyone needs it. And how can we meet it within your needs? We have all types of services, and we certainly take the opportunity for government funding when there's the opportunity or need for someone who is economically challenged or doesn't have the technology that they need. The electricity model and the fiber and Smart Park is, how do we bring these two people together? How do we educate and create that legacy and generational knowledge that we need?
So one question I suppose someone might have is from a return on investment standpoint, by investing in the park, do you get a return on that, a positive return?
Yeah, certainly we have all of this new electricity load, as well as now we have immediate internet, broadband, but then it becomes more. Hydra Aluminium, they said to us, yeah, surprisingly, 2 of the advanced technology positions we needed to hire were working in South Bend, 30 miles from us, and living in Cassopolis. They did not expect to find these advanced technical jobs and personnel living in Cassopolis. So even in our own neighborhoods, we didn't realize some of the skill sets that were here and living outside. And the pandemic taught us that. Many people, cities and metropolitan areas have been growing. Well, it's been growing because of the density and job opportunity. But as soon as people had an opportunity to go back to perhaps the roots, they opted to do that. And so now in the cooperative way, we can do that. And we can do that across workforce and daycare and housing and advanced technologies so that people can live and prosper where they want. And if it's rural roots, that's where they get to live and prosper where they want.
Excellent. Well, that plays well to the theme of Fiber Connect 2023. So, Arell, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.